Okay, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a 1967 book by Harleen Ellison, and I was familiar with it honestly because I like recently listened to The War of the Worlds, and I was thinking about it, and I think more people in my generation know AM, like the Allied Master Computer, from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, more than like if I asked somebody like what like where the tripods came from, like would they even associate like tripods with aliens? I thought that was really interesting, that I think this has more of an impact on my generation than something like War of the Worlds, which seemed to be such a big cultural moment for America. So that was, I don't know, because I was familiar for the 1995 point and click adventure game, and I had played that all the way through. I played it about a year ago, and it was vastly different than that. So the book is the book. It's a short story. It is 11 pages long. I think it got originally published in like a magazine or something, and then I got put into a compilation with a bunch of other Ellison's work, which you can't buy. There was like almost no legal way to like read this. Don't ask me how I read this. So I wanted to start off. This had really, really, really great descriptions. I thought the descriptions in this were like really, they were so gruesome and terrifying. They really had a lot of impact in them, and I thought that it was really cool, and it was really interesting to read. I also want to talk about that. I think this is like one of the few stories I've kind of read. Not one of the few ones, but more like it has like that unreliable narrator, because it's told from the perspective of Ted, which is one of the 5 people being tortured forever by Am, and he's one of the people. Well, he's the person that like every thought, every like narration, it comes from Ted, and the characters are way different. So, Benny is okay. Benny, like, so Am is like taken away. What made these people, like people? What made these people tick? Almost. So it was like, so Benny, he was he was handsome. So then Benny ends up becoming like this human ape. He he's described as lucid, and then he becomes mad. He was gay, so Am gave him a cock as hung as a horse. So this is not one of the points where I'd like to say that this was unreliable narration. This is true, and at least in Ted's view, that because Ellen became like a slut. That's what Am did to Ellen, and we'll get to that. But like Benny's her favorite one to have sex with because he has the largest dick according to Ted. And it's like, okay, well, first off, the size of a dick doesn't mean you're gay. Like, maybe it is also part of the unreliable narrator. I don't want to, but it's like, that's, man, the more I think about it, actually, it could be part of the unreliable narrator, because, like, does this character Ted think that all gay people are, like, sissies? Like, they all, like, there's no tops in the gay community. They're all bottoms. Like this doesn't, anyways. And if that is not an unreliable narrator moment, does that mean that Eileen's kind of like forcing Benny to have sex? Because I mean, you're gay, it doesn't go away. God, I mean, if conversion therapy could just give people like like this is awful. If conversion therapy worked by just giving people like those honey packets, that's like that everybody is using nowadays, which is incredibly bad for you. Don't do that. Or Viagra is the classic. But like if that made one not gay, I think we would have found that out by now. Um. Anyways, um, you have Gorister, who was described as a Connie, which I think this is a word made up for this book, and I kind of looked it up too, and they were like, yeah, because it's like it's a conscientious objector. So he was also described as like a peace marcher, and so what Am did to him was he became a shoulder shrugger, which I think was really funny. It's just like like that's honestly not that bad of a of a like personality change according to what the others got. Although I do want to be in Benny's case, I think Ted describes Benny because Benny lost his mind first. So I think that he describes Benny as having like the least torment out of all of them. Nimdok doesn't really get into what Nimdok was or what Nimdok's torture is. Just as he looks like blood drained and pale whenever he comes back from the group. And then Ted was left pretty much untouched because he was the youngest of the group. And then Eileen. Eileen's description by Ted is very polarizing because it starts on immediately like, Eileen, Am, that bastard, left Eileen untouched. He made her more of a slut than she'd ever been. It's like, okay, you left her untouched, and immediately the next sentence contradicts that. But it's really interesting. God, the language too is. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm coming like, yeah, I think Ted was just such an unreliable narrator here. And obviously, like, these people aren't all good. I think mostly you're supposed to think that these people are kind of good in this short story. In the point and click game, it's far indifferent. For like, because Benny was like described as being like a university professor, but in the book, in the point and click adventure game, he was like this. And I played it over a year ago, so you have to apologize if I have to apologize if I get anything wrong, but he was like this military sergeant who killed off some of his corps, like some of the members of his corps, and so he was kind of atoning for getting them killed in this war zone. Like, it's far indifferent. Nimdok is obviously this Nazi scientist who his whole thing is that he has to like free these people that he's doing these horrid experiments on, and I think he ends up getting killed for it because the people who he freed is like, thanks for freeing us, but we're still gonna kill you. And so like, oh, he's like, okay. Ted's story was really weird. It was the last one I did. It was like this whole castle thing, which included Eileen. Which I think that was very one-sided of Ted. So I think they kind of kept Ted's character the same in the point and click game. Gorister is like weird thing was he was like an owner of a bar, Um, and there was this guy that came in. What did you talk about? We had to save his like he had to talk to his mother, which was like abusing him in like this meat locker, and save I think his girlfriend. And you had to blow up this weird blimp. His story felt nonsensical to me, um, in the point and click game, and I honestly kind of like of all the character changes, um, I kind of like the point and click version better of them, but I I don't. I think that of all the characters in the short story, the only one that I think is better than what they eventually ended up becoming in the point and click game was, um, was uh Benny. No, it was Gloucester, because in the point and click game I didn't really get him, but in this it's like I felt like, okay, he was someone, and then they took away that from him, and so, um, yeah. Uh, and then the so well, we're also talking about like, so the weird thing with like Ellen's changed. I think Ellen was the most weirdly changed, because in this original thing she's like described by Ted as this horror. Like there's this moment where Benny jumps up on these like girders to try to escape, Am's steel belly. And Ellen is described by Ted as reaching falsities, telling the others to save Benny, but she was only really doing it because she still wanted to taste his cock. It is so, yeah, it is such like harshness and bitterness that I think Ted's that carries into Ted's narration of um of a character like Ellen. Um, I do want to talk about, there was some, um, it's the 1960s, you know, don't have great, like they describe people as driven mad as like words that you really shouldn't use for people with a mental illness, that, some people would consider almost like slur type words for people with mental illness. They also had the R word in there, of course, for good measure. We almost made it through the end, and then it's like in the last paragraph. Um, uh, it's there. Um, oh, I totally skipped out Ellen's character. So in the point and click, Ellen's whole story is that she has the fear of the color yellow because, in the point and click game, her story is kind of getting over this like fear of when she got essayed by a janitor in, this elevator at her work, this yellow elevator. So no, it wasn't a yellow elevator. The guy was wearing yellow because he was a janitor. I think it was something like that. Um, and it's just like coming from that, where it's like it's much more sympathetic towards Eileen. And don't get me wrong, I think it almost Eileen's voice lines in that game, like the most distinct thing I remember about that point and click game was Eileen's voice line almost feeling like at the beginning of Eileen's story, it feels like she's putting much more of like, I hate to use this, a black scent. It feels like the voice directors told her to talk more black, and then slowly throughout the course of the game she kind of talks kind of more what feels less forced. I don't know if I felt that. That's like something I felt when playing the game. I don't know if that's crazy to say. It's also weird to say that, people don't know who the hell voiced Ted in that game. Which, I guess it makes sense. No one knows anyone who worked on like arcade games like Metal Slug, but I think that's kind of crazy for something like this, where it's like no one knows who voiced, you know what was the titular character, not the titular, that's not what I'm talking, what the main character in the the short story. Um, but what was also really interesting about the writing of the story was that it used punch cards to like denote a different section. So like something would happen, and Ted would give his little snide remarks on it, and then it would be separated by a punch card, and the next section would be like, okay, and then later on this happened. um so that was kind of like cute. It's like the fighting, and it's this computer, and so you're using the punch cards like for old computers as like this divider. So that was kind of cute. um and then something that really shocked me was that, so this pillar that I swear to God, 90% of the people in my generation could like recite what is on that pillar word for word. The hate, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you all since I began to live. There is 347.88 million miles of wafer thin wires that fill my complex, and if hate was engraved on every nano angstrom, it would not describe 1 nanosecond of it. It's something like, anyways, that pillar is metaphorical in the short story, because it's like it's in Ted's mind, because it's like Ted gets like knocked out, and he has like this vision of Am searching his mind and going into like the holes that Am has put into his mind, and there's like this giant hole in the center of his brain, and out from it spurts this pillar that has inscribed on it those words, and like Am is mechanical laughing, and then it like he pulls out of it and wakes up. Like, I didn't know. It almost makes me wonder that, like, because Ted said he wasn't affected, but I wonder if he was a less bitter person. Like, he was just someone who was really nice and like social, and he became like this really bitter and angsty person. Yeah, the more I think about this text, the more I like my opinion changes of it. I still don't think it excuses the language usage, but I don't know. It's like something really interesting to think about, because I haven't really, like, this is such a like an interesting version of like the unreliable narrator. But also the ending. So the ending of the short story is that basically the whole short story is like these, Ted, Benny, Gorster, Nimdoc, and Eileen going to find these canned foods that Am had opened, had left for them in this frozen cave. So they travel months eating like worms and rotting flesh to get to this this ice caves. And once they get there, they realize that there was cans, but Am had not provided them with a can opener, which is such a funny ending, because there was so many things. I feel like there was like so many ways to open a can without a can opener. Like, even like not one of those cans had a pull tab. But anyways, it was a kind of like goofy ending, I feel. But and then like, so the ending is like they get really mad, and especially Benny, he's like throwing stuff around the room, and then he jumps onto Nimdoc and starts was it Nimdoc? He jumps onto one of them and starts tearing their face off. And I don't think it was Nimdoc. I think he jumped on Gorster, and he's tearing Gorster's face off, and then the icicles of this ice cave fell down, and Ted, immediately realizing that like this was his one chance of actually beating Am at his game, so to say, because they've been living in this belly of Am for almost, I think it was 109 years. So they were living in this belly for 109 years, and so Ted, taking this chance, takes the icicle, stabs both Benny and Gorster with an icicle, killing them, and then Aline, seeing what he did, understood immediately, picked up another icicle and rammed it into Nimdok's mouth, and like pinned him against the wall. And then it's like Elling looks at Ted, and then Ted picks up the icicle, and it's like Elling's like expression, like it's like burned into like Ted's like mind as he's killing her, and it's like a vivid description of both like agony and relief, as he like jabs the icicle into her. Am gets really angry, of course, and then turns Ted into like this little slug creature that oozes pus, and then of course Ted goes, like describes his face. He's got like the no mouth, and he's like, I have no mouth, I must scream. Yeah, it was really, I mean, it's a short read. It was a really interesting read, especially since, again, I think, my generation mostly knows it from the point and click game. And so it's really interesting to read the original work and how much it is changed, but also how much it makes sense what they changed about it. And I do like most of the changes because the game doesn't have like this unreliable narrator, such a harsh perspective, because the perspective is more neutral, and it goes into more of why these, like the background of these characters, and I was thinking about the ending of the point and click game, and how when I got to the ending, I was kind of confused because you're in Am's like cerebral cortex full of wires that are wafer thin. And all you can really do is die there. And when you die, of course, you see Ted become the slug. But like you can argue around with the 3 different id, ego, super ego of Am, and get like a good ending, which shows you that there's more humans on like the moon in waiting to be released back onto Earth. But I don't think you're really like, that was a good ending, I think, for people who played the game over and over again, because that's like one of those endings that like you have to follow a guide for, and that it's like kind of famous in gaming to be like, that was like, this game is kind of bullshit because the ending, like, all you can do is die. But that makes sense almost from the short story. That makes a lot more sense, knowing that the good ending for the story was them dying, was them having the release of this 109 years of torture. And it's the same kind of in the game, where these people are being tortured for 109 years in these same scenarios. You run through the scenarios once, and then you escape Am, you release him, and then you kill yourselves, and then you get the ending of the game. The good ending is so complex, you have so many different things that you need to do, that it almost makes sense why it's like one of these most obscure endings in gaming, that I always thought was like, wow, this is just kind of bullshit. But also now that I'm reading the story, it's like, no, this was something that very few were meant to see. and that you're not supposed to get to, because you're supposed to be like, oh, their release, their death was the ending, which, gamers hate, because I mean, especially since you just played as these characters through some ludicrous puzzles. I mean, you literally get taken to like Nazi World War II within like Nimdok's campaign. It's really, it makes sense why that one has kind of been like the culture, like this is the ending of the game that you always see everywhere, and it's like, oh, it's kind of bullshit to get, but like, no, I see why it's kind of bullshit, because you're not supposed to get it. I'm kind of rattling on at this point, so I think I'm gonna stop here, but it was a very interesting short story. I do recommend reading it because it's only 11 pages, but it's very intense. But I thought it was very good.